She just thought he was a poor old man, always sitting alone in the corner of the cafe, ordering the cheapest black coffee, never leaving a tip, but what she didn't know, he could write a check for $10 million right then and there. And even more surprising, a casual comment she made led him to cancel a tax hike plan that would have affected millions of Americans. If you believe that a small action can change a major policy, hit the subscribe button on the Heart Glow channel, where simple stories bring hope for kindness. Now, let's dive into this story together. Brooklyn is a small yet vibrant borough, where the street corners are never devoid of people. And everyone has their own story. On any given day, the streets here are never quiet. Every morning, the sound of car horns, hurried footsteps, and the tired eyes of workers, students, and even elderly folks stepping out from old houses, all come together to create a lively picture of this city. Tucked modestly in a small corner, an old cafe called Corner Brew has become a familiar stop for these people. The shop isn't very big, with walls that have faded from pale yellow to gray over time. The rich aroma of coffee wafts from within, inviting those who are in a hurry to find a moment of peace in the hustle and bustle. The rustic wooden tables, old chairs marked by the passage of time, and the handmade barista counter all contribute to creating a warm space, like a second home for those who visit. Here, you don't need to dress fancy or try to impress, just be yourself. Hot coffee, a little pastry, and simple conversations. That's all you need. Every morning, the cafe opens at 7 a.m., and soon after, the first workers come in, hurriedly choosing a cup of coffee to start their day. Students come to escape the noise of the library, and the elderly enjoy the quiet atmosphere, where they can chat about old stories. No matter who they are, when they step into the cafe, they all find an indescribable peace within themselves. Emily is a 22-year-old girl, with a bright smile but eyes often hiding a sense of worry. Having just graduated from university, she works at Corner Brew, a job she considers temporary while saving enough money to open her own dream cafe. But between her grand dreams and the harsh reality, Emily sometimes feels like she's in an endless battle. Rent for the month, utility bills, tuition for the business management course she's taking, all of these things feel like a storm, almost making her lose hope. Nevertheless, Emily always tries to maintain a positive spirit. Every morning when she greets customers at the cafe, the soft glow of neon lights illuminates her face, and every drop of coffee she brews is filled with passion and hope in every movement. She often dreams of a small, charming cafe in the heart of Brooklyn, where she could serve customers, listen to their stories, and share her own. But that dream is not easy to realize, and when she looks at her monthly expense sheet, Emily often feels like she's racing against time. Among the regular customers of the cafe, there's one person who always catches Emily's attention. He doesn't speak much. Always sitting in a corner near the window, where the light shines on the wrinkles of his face. He wears a thick coat, even though the weather outside isn't that cold, and every morning, he orders only one thing: black coffee with no sugar. No matter who he is, Emily can immediately recognize his presence because he always arrives at the same time, choosing the same quiet corner to sit. Walter is a man with a rugged appearance, never looking at anyone for too long, and never seeming to care about what's happening around him. But strangely, although he never speaks to anyone, he always leaves a tip double the value of his coffee. Emily couldn't help but feel curious about this man. She had tried to start a conversation a few times, but he would just smile and continue sipping his coffee, sometimes jotting something down in his small notebook. She thought, maybe he was just a lonely old man, looking for a quiet place to slow down. Nothing special. Gradually, Emily began to notice small details about Walter. His gestures, his gaze when he looked out the window, or when he gently closed his notebook and left. There was something sad in his eyes, as if he carried a pain that he couldn't share. She wondered, did he have a family? Did he have anyone to confide in about his sadness? On mornings when she saw him sitting there, sometimes Emily couldn't stop staring at him, as if there was an invisible thread connecting them. When he stood up and gathered his things, he would leave some tip money, and then quickly exit the cafe without saying a word. But every time he left, Emily noticed that he would gently open his notebook and write something. She couldn't help but wonder, what was he writing? She wondered if it was notes about some project, or simply his thoughts while drinking coffee. Although their conversations initially consisted of brief exchanges, gradually, Emily and Walter began to have lighter conversations whenever he came in. About the weather, the coffee, the changes in the city. During these times, Emily felt like she was stepping into another world, a world where Walter wasn't just a quiet man, but someone with deep thoughts, searching for something that even he didn't fully understand. Every morning when Walter came in, Emily had a black coffee ready for him, just the way he liked it. She always asked, "How are you today, Mr. Walter?" And he would usually reply with a soft smile, then continue looking out the window, sometimes asking a simple question like, "Do you think this city is changing?" Those questions, though seemingly simple, always made Emily feel like there was something hidden behind them that she didn't yet fully understand. One morning, when the cafe door opened and Walter wasn't sitting in his usual corner, Emily suddenly felt something was missing. The other customers still came in, the regulars still ordered their coffee, but without Walter, the cafe felt like it had lost a part of itself. She looked over at the corner, where his chair still stood empty, and a feeling of emptiness washed over her. It seemed like a part of herself had disappeared with him. She suddenly realized, when did she start waiting for someone whose name she had never asked? When did his presence become an inseparable part of her daily routine? She didn't understand why she felt this way, but it was so strong, as if Walter wasn't just a regular customer but a small part of her life story. 3 days passed, and as usual, Emily woke up early in the morning to prepare coffee for the shop. But there was something different today. Walter didn't show up. She was used to seeing him sit in the corner every morning. A part of the atmosphere here. But today, that corner was empty, and she felt a bit of emptiness, even though he wasn't a family member, just a regular customer. She told herself he was probably busy with something, but that feeling of absence haunted her throughout the morning. The next morning, when the shop opened, a familiar figure walked in. Emily looked up and recognized it was Walter, but he didn't look as healthy as usual. His right hand had a small bruise, and his face seemed a bit weary. Still, he wore his thick coat, and still held his little notebook, but this time, when she looked into his eyes, Emily could sense something was different. He looked at her quietly, then softly said, "Old age isn't easy to swallow, my dear." His brief words were full of meaning. Emily didn't know how to respond. She simply made him a cup of black coffee, just the way he liked, but inside, she started to feel that something wasn't right. Walter, the quiet man, now revealed a sadness that was hard to express. When the work in the shop was done, Emily decided not to leave as usual. She stayed behind the bar and made a special cup of coffee for Walter, one that she knew he would like, strong and full of flavor, just like him. She took a chair, sat across from him, and gently asked, "Would you like to tell me about the old days? I think you have many interesting stories." Walter seemed a bit surprised, but then he smiled, put his notebook down, and began to tell. His story started like this: years ago, when I first came to New York, I had nothing but 2 empty hands. This city can make you fall from the very first moment if you're not tough enough. I slept on a bench in Central Park, ate leftover meals from trash cans, and did all kinds of jobs to survive, washing dishes for small restaurants, selling newspapers on street corners. Back then, I only had one dream, not to live on the streets anymore. Emily listened intently to every word he said, clearly feeling the pain in his voice. The stories of tough times, loneliness, and the persistence to survive in a brutal city like New York left her speechless. She hadn't expected that the man sitting across from her had gone through such difficult years. His story made her realize that sometimes, those people we think are invisible in our lives, carry stories that are truly worth listening to. The first day I came to New York, I had no money, Walter continued, his voice drifting into a space full of sad memories. No friends, no family. I wandered around looking for work, but everyone rejected me. Finally, I had to sleep on a bench in the park and make a living by washing dishes in a small restaurant in Chinatown. I remember one time, I only had a sandwich, eating it quickly on the sidewalk. I watched the people passing by, they had stable lives, families, friends, and I wondered if I would ever escape this life. Emily looked at him, feeling as if she were seeing a part of life she had never fully understood. The struggles he went through made her reflect on her own life. How could she complain when she had a stable job every day? How could she blame herself when every morning, she had the freedom to choose what she wanted to do? Walter had lived through the darkest years, and now, he was still here, calmly recounting his journey. She could feel his strength, a man who never gave up, even when facing the harshest challenges. When Walter stopped, Emily felt it was time to share her own story. She took a deep breath, then began talking about her family. My parents passed away when I was very young. My younger brother and I had to take care of each other from then on. He's only 12, but he had to witness all the struggles I went through. I didn't want him to suffer what I had, but I didn't know what else to do. Sometimes, I feel like I have to push myself to be the person he needs. She paused and looked at Walter. My dream isn't as big as others. I just want a mobile coffee cart, a place where I can make coffee for people, go everywhere, and be free. I don't need a big shop or an empire. As long as I can do what I love and make a living from it, that's all I need. Walter listened, then smiled, his gaze softening. Emily's story made him feel an uncanny similarity between her and himself. Although their circumstances were different, both of them had a simple dream, to live true to their passions, no matter what life threw at them. After listening to Emily's story, Walter asked her a question that surprised her. So, if you had $1 million, what would you do? The question caught Emily off guard for a moment. She had dreamed of having a mobile coffee cart, but never thought about such large sums. $1 million? She smiled lightly. I think I only need 10,000. With that amount, I could buy an old car, repaint it, and start my business. That's all I need. Walter looked at her for a long time, then smiled. 10,000. Sometimes, that's all we need, isn't it? The whole evening, as Emily drove home, her mind kept swirling with thoughts of her conversation with Walter. That night, she couldn't sleep. She looked out the car window, the streetlights flashing by, but her heart wasn't at peace like those sparkling lights. She thought about Walter's question, about her dream, about both 10,000 and $1 million. She felt like some kind of power was awakening inside her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. as she drove through the familiar streets of Brooklyn, she suddenly realized something she hadn't thought about before: Walter wasn't just a regular customer at the coffee shop. He was the only person in Brooklyn who made her feel truly listened to. Every time she talked to him, she didn't feel ignored or unimportant. Walter always listened patiently and understandingly, as if he really cared about what she had to say. No one in her life had done that before. Despite having loved ones around her, they were always too busy, too caught up in their own problems. But Walter? He only needed to listen to her, and that made her feel valued. It was a strange feeling she had never experienced before. Walter was the only one who made her feel understood, like a real person, with all her dreams, hopes, and worries. When she smiled, he smiled with her; when she was sad, he sat quietly beside her without needing to say anything. And that made her feel comforted, a deep connection she hadn't found with anyone else. Emily stopped the car at an intersection, looking out the window where the streets kept changing. But in her heart, something had changed forever. She no longer felt as alone as before. She felt that, no matter how hard life got, having someone like Walter, in a small coffee shop at the corner of Brooklyn, was enough to make her believe again. She realized that sometimes, a life doesn't need a lot of money. As long as you have people who truly understand you, that's enough to make you happy. And Walter was the one who had given her that feeling. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with the program, we kindly ask you to leave a comment and share your thoughts in the comments section below. If you find the program meaningful, please don't hesitate to share it to support the channel and spread the value to everyone around you. Wishing you all a meaningful listening experience. One morning, as Emily was preparing her usual cup of coffee, the TV in the corner of the cafe came to life with breaking news. She turned around and blinked a few times upon hearing the announcement about a new law raising taxes on high-income earners. At first, she thought it was just another piece of ordinary news, but as she continued to listen, she started to realize its impact. The enormous numbers in the announcement left her feeling dizzy. This was a law that would bring significant changes not just for the wealthy but also for ordinary workers like herself. Prices would rise, and rent would follow suit. The tuition fees for the universities her younger brother dreamed of attending were also caught in the whirlwind. Everything seemed to be heading toward a financial storm no one could escape. She looked at the screen, where the faces in the news broadcast all looked worried. The announcer's voice echoed, "This is a controversial decision, a major step by the government, but will it truly help those in need?" That question reverberated in Emily's mind, and she couldn't help but wonder, could someone like her survive through this tax storm? In the small cafe, regular customers continued to come and go, oblivious to the major changes in society. They went about their daily tasks, hardly noticing the effects of the new law. But for Emily, everything felt heavier. She wasn't just struggling to make ends meet. Now, even the once normal things like rent and tuition had become more difficult than ever. The pressures seemed to be piling up on her shoulders, and she couldn't tell when she'd be able to breathe again. The next day, when Emily walked into the cafe, the atmosphere seemed quieter than usual. She saw the owner standing at the register, talking to a woman. A new sign had appeared by the door: reduced working hours due to the tough economic situation. Emily couldn't help but be startled. This was the official announcement. Meaning she would only work half a day instead of a full day as she had before. Everything seemed to be turning upside down so quickly. She knew that with reduced hours, she would need to find another job to make ends meet. Rent, utility bills, and her brother's tuition fees were still pressing down on her like ghosts she couldn't escape. She remembered the nights when her brother asked about college tuition, and she could only smile softly, telling him everything would be okay. But today, Emily felt far from okay. When her brief shift ended, she stepped outside, filled with anxiety. She wondered, how could she make enough money? How could she continue to chase her dreams when life kept pulling her into a spiral with no way out? She could take a second job, but would it be enough to cover everything? Each step she took on the streets of Brooklyn felt like walking in the dark, unsure where the end was. And it seemed like the darkness grew thicker when she thought about those around her. One afternoon, as Emily walked home after her shift, she happened to see Walter sitting alone in the park, on an old bench. Strangely, he was eating instant noodles, looking rushed, but when she looked closely, she noticed he didn't seem hurried at all. On the contrary, he seemed to be savoring each noodle, eating slowly and calmly. Emily had no intention of disturbing him, but as she was about to pass by, a homeless man approached, his hands shaking, his face gaunt. She couldn't hear their conversation clearly, but Emily could see the embarrassment on the homeless man's face. Walter looked at him for a moment, said nothing, stood up, and invited him to sit down. Then he did something strange. He gently pushed his noodles toward the homeless man and quietly watched him eat. The noodles Walter had prepared for himself suddenly became a meal for a stranger. Emily stopped in her tracks, unsure of what to do. The scene in front of her caught her by surprise. The man she had always thought of as eccentric and quiet had done this. A small gesture, but one full of kindness. A bowl of noodles might not be valuable, but to the homeless man, it could be the only meal he would have all day. Emily felt something shift within her, a kind of emotion she had never experienced before. What she saw today was not charity out of pity but a genuine act of sharing from the heart. Although the event had surprised her, Emily couldn't deny that she began to question Walter's past. She wondered if he was a veteran or someone who had gone through difficulties in life and now sought a simple life. Maybe Walter had once been wealthy but lost everything for some reason. Or perhaps he was just someone who had experienced too many losses and wanted to find a peaceful life, free from the worries of fame or money. She began to observe him more closely, paying attention to his every action, every word he spoke. But when she tried to ask him about his past, Walter only smiled and dodged her question. "There's nothing interesting to say about the past, my dear," he simply replied before turning away. She sensed reluctance in his words, and that only made her more curious. Walter didn't want to share much about himself, and perhaps, he didn't want anyone to know what he had been through. But in Emily's mind, the mystery surrounding him only grew, and she felt like she was standing on the threshold of a story whose ending she couldn't yet predict. One rainy day, after Emily had finished her shift and was preparing to clean up, she happened to find Walter's notebook left on a table in the corner of the café. She hesitated for a moment before deciding to open it. Though she didn't intend to invade his privacy, her curiosity, and the special bond she felt with him made it hard to resist flipping through its pages. What she found shocked her. Walter's notebook was filled with small notes, all related to the lives of the poor. There were entries about rainy mornings and the daily struggles of laborers trying to make ends meet. There were notes about small shops, humble eateries, and the scattered conversations Walter had overheard about tax policies and changes within the community. Each line was filled with deep observations, an understanding few could possess. She looked at each page, each note, and felt the hardships he had witnessed. These notes weren't just meaningless words but stories about survival, about people fighting every day to exist. A final page in the notebook made Emily stop for longer. On it was a sentence clearly written, underlined in red pen: understand before speaking. Look before judging. Touch before changing. Emily blinked, looking back at the words. They seemed to seep into her mind, awakening a profound realization. Those words felt like a reminder that before changing anything, one must understand what is happening, see every angle of a situation before making any conclusions. She realized that Walter wasn't just observing others. He was also reflecting on himself. The words in the notebook weren't just notes, they were reminders he had written for himself. She suddenly understood that, no matter who Walter was or what his past was, he had always had a strong perspective on facing the world and the poor people around him. The next day, Emily decided she could no longer remain silent. She sat down in front of Walter, who was enjoying his cup of coffee as usual. She looked him in the eye and asked, "Are you a journalist? Or a sociologist?" The question escaped from her in a surge of uncontrollable curiosity. She had read the notes in his notebook and realized that it wasn't a coincidence that Walter was so deeply interested in the lives of the poor. Their struggles, and especially tax policies. Walter didn't respond right away. He simply smiled, a gentle smile, as if he had been waiting for this question. After a moment, he answered simply, "Maybe." His answer left Emily surprised. She had expected a more detailed explanation, but his response made her feel intrigued and more eager to learn about Walter. She didn't know who he was, but the more she interacted with him, the more she realized that his actions and the questions he asked weren't simple at all. Every question, every action of his had a deeper meaning than what appeared on the surface. After these brief conversations, Emily gradually became more open with Walter. One day, while making coffee for him, she suddenly shared her worries. She told him about the difficult situation in her life, about the rising tuition fees, and how she wouldn't be able to continue studying without help. "I'll have to drop out, Mr. Walter," she said, her voice full of concern. "Everything is too much for me, I don't have the money for tuition. And my job doesn't pay enough." Walter looked at her silently, his eyes still calm as usual. She waited for him to say something, maybe a word of comfort or a solution, but he remained silent. No advice was given, only a quiet pause that made her confront her own emotions. After a while, Walter gently asked, "So, what will you do differently?" This question took Emily by surprise. She had never thought about changing her approach to the problem. She had simply thought she would have to drop out and accept life as it was. But Walter made her think about something deeper. Was there another way to change her situation? Could she do something different rather than just accepting the hardships? Walter's question was like a wake-up call, making Emily realize that in order to change, she needed to change the way she thought and acted. The next day, when Emily arrived at the café, she noticed something strange. Walter didn't show up. She couldn't understand why he wasn't there. He always arrived on time, sat in his usual corner, and enjoyed his coffee in silence. But today, he was absent. Emily wondered if something had happened to him, whether he was sick or facing some kind of difficulty. But no, his absence stretched on, and Emily began to feel an uneasy sense of worry in her heart. A few days later, while working in the café, a shocking piece of news appeared on the front page of a major newspaper. There was a picture of Walter, accompanied by a large headline: "Billionaire Walter C. Bennett suddenly leaves his company and disappears from the media." Emily couldn't believe her eyes. She stared at the photo of Walter, the man she had seen every morning for the past 5 months. How could this be? He wasn't a famous person, he was just an old man with a worn-out coat and simple stories. She felt as though she were living in a movie. The man she had talked to, someone who never called himself a billionaire, had now become a famous figure, a billionaire with great influence. Everything she knew about him, the stories he told about hardships, the things he wrote in his notebook, now seemed to be part of a bigger mystery. Walter was not an ordinary person. He was a major figure in society, and she had only just realized that, looking at Walter's picture in the newspaper, Emily couldn't believe what she was seeing. This was the customer she had come to know over the past few months. Walter, with his thoughtful eyes and small stories, had become an irreplaceable part of her life. She couldn't understand how he had been able to hide his true identity for so long. She recalled their meetings, the mornings when he sat there, quietly sipping his coffee and observing the surroundings. He never said much, but each time he spoke, it was a meaningful word. She never thought he could be a billionaire. She just thought he was a lonely old man seeking peace in a noisy world. Now, seeing him in the newspaper, Emily realized that she hadn't just met an ordinary person. Walter was a person of power, someone with great influence. This made her feel both admiration and a little regret. She wondered if she could ever fully understand what he was trying to convey. But no matter what, the truth remained the same. Walter had changed the way she viewed life. A week after Walter disappeared, Emily received a strange letter. The envelope was addressed to her, Emily. She didn't know who had sent it, but part of her felt it was connected to Walter. When she opened the letter, she found a small card inside, with a simple phrase that made her eyes fill with tears: Humanitarian Startup Fund, first recipient, Emily, Brooklyn. She couldn't understand it, but all the feelings she had for Walter seemed to be validated now. He hadn't just been a customer, he had been the one to help her realize that she could do something greater, overcome the barriers she thought were insurmountable. The small card was like encouragement, a recognition of her efforts to pursue her dreams. Holding the card in her hand, Emily couldn't contain her emotions. Tears streamed down her face. She suddenly realized that Walter hadn't come to escape from this world, he had come to understand it, to look deeper into the aspects that others didn't see. He had come to learn and feel, not to hide behind his wealth and power. What he left for her wasn't just a card, it was a great lesson about life. Walter had taught her that, in order to change, we not only need material strength but also the ability to understand and empathize with those around us. Only then can we truly create change. One day, as Emily held the money from the fund Walter had sent, she couldn't stop thinking about what he had done for her. She didn't want to use this money just to open a regular cafe like any other. Instead, she wanted to create something special, a space where anyone could come and feel the sense of sharing and love, just like Walter had done for her. With the help of her friends and people in the neighborhood, Emily began preparing for her dream. She found an old but promising mobile coffee truck, then refurbished it, transforming it into a cozy and welcoming space. She named the truck Walter's Brew, a simple name but one that carried Walter's essence, the man who had changed her perspective on life. What was unique about this coffee truck was that Emily didn't want to set a fixed price for her coffee. Instead, she hung a sign that read, "Pay what you can." She wanted everyone who came for coffee to decide how much they would pay, based on their circumstances and what they could afford. She believed such a simple act could create a sense of community and make people feel they wouldn't be judged or have to worry about finances when seeking a warm cup of coffee. Emily recalled Walter's words, "Coffee is for sharing." And she wanted everyone who came to her truck not only to drink coffee but also to experience the human connection and empathy we often forget in the rush of life. When Emily's first mobile coffee truck officially launched, she could not forget Walter's teachings. She stood in front of the truck, looking at the words she had written and posted on a small part of the notice board: "Coffee is for sharing." Just like an old man once shared his time with me. These words were simple, yet they carried so much emotion. Every day, as people came to Emily's coffee truck, they read those words. Some smiled, others paused, as if remembering an old memory. Emily didn't just serve coffee, she also offered stories, memories that Walter had left behind. And it seemed that each cup of coffee held a part of the humanity, a part of the compassion Walter had taught her. Sharing is not something grand. Sometimes it's just a cup of coffee and a small story. She stood there every morning, watching the customers stop by, listening to their stories. Some were hard-working people, others were students seeking a little peace in the hustle and bustle of life. They all came not just to enjoy coffee but to find something, a little warmth in their hearts when they felt tired. Day after day, Emily's coffee truck became not only a familiar spot for coffee lovers but also a space for connecting the community. The locals started coming by more frequently. Not just to enjoy a good cup of coffee, but to share life stories, to recall beautiful memories, or simply to dream about better things to come. Each day, the coffee truck became a place where people turned when they needed a little comfort, a bit of faith in life. Some came with burdens, sharing difficulties in their work or family. Others came just to talk about dreams, hopes that had yet to come true. Emily listened to them, just as Walter had listened to her. And each time, she felt the power of sharing. The strength of truly listening and encouraging others. Coffee was no longer just a drink, it had become a part of stories, part of conversations that connected people. The community not only found a place to drink coffee but also found the empathy and humanity they lacked in their busy lives. One day, a reporter from a major newspaper came to interview Emily. They had heard about her story and how the Walters Brew coffee truck was spreading on social media. The story of Walter and how Emily had created a space for sharing and connecting among the neighborhood residents had caught many people's attention. The reporter asked Emily to share the inspiration behind the idea of a mobile coffee truck and why she had decided not to set a fixed price for the coffee. Emily couldn't hide her emotions when she spoke about Walter. She told stories about him, how he had come and shared his deep insights about life, the struggles of the poor, and the tax policies he had researched. Walter's story made many rethink what they were doing, the lack of empathy in society, and the changes that needed to be made. The story of Walter's Brew began to spread rapidly on social media. It became a wave of reflection about compassion, sharing, and the actions we needed to take in the face of rising taxes and growing wealth inequality. Walter's story touched the hearts of thousands, making them reflect on the core values of life. One morning, when Emily's coffee truck was crowded, a well-dressed man walked up and stood for a moment, observing. She recognized him as a local politician, someone she had seen on TV during congressional meetings. He approached the truck, and without saying much, gently placed some money into the donation jar. Then, he looked at Emily and said something that surprised her. "This is something I've never seen in Congress." Emily stood there, stunned for a moment. His words seemed to acknowledge what she was doing, not just a coffee truck, but a symbol of change, of compassion in a world full of injustice. This politician, someone always in power, hadn't hesitated to admit that Emily's coffee truck had done something that he and others in the government had not. It brought connection and kindness between the poor and those in power. As the days passed, Emily became accustomed to the new rhythm of life, where her mobile coffee truck had become an essential part of the Brooklyn neighborhood. Every morning, she brewed hot coffee, not only to serve regulars but also to listen to stories, to share with strangers seeking empathy amidst the fast pace of life. Coffee was no longer just a drink, it was the bridge that connected people, a place where they didn't feel alone in this vast world. Standing amidst the steam of the coffee cups, in a space filled with sounds and stories, Emily couldn't help but smile when thinking about Walter. She recalled his words, the lessons he had taught her: understand before you speak. Look before you judge. Touch before you change. Those words helped her realize that sometimes change doesn't have to be grand, it can come from small actions, from truly listening and understanding one another. Amidst the coffee steam, Emily gently whispered to herself, "Thank you, Walter. I'm still learning how to listen." These words were not just a simple thank you. They were a profound expression of gratitude, an acknowledgement of the transformation she was going through. Because of Walter, she had not only opened a coffee truck but had opened her heart, learning how to listen and understand the stories that others were carrying inside them. Everything seemed to have settled for Emily after her coffee truck. Walter's brew became an integral part of Brooklyn. She had found joy and purpose in her work, connecting with the neighborhood's people over warm cups of coffee. Her customers had become close friends, and the daily conversations helped her better understand life and the values that Walter had often mentioned. But one morning, as she was preparing for a new day of work, the delivery driver brought a strange envelope, with no sender's name. The envelope's color was simple, with the handwritten word Emily in the top left corner. A strange feeling overwhelmed Emily as she picked it up. She opened it and couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the letter inside. It was handwritten, with Walter's familiar handwriting. A mixture of emotions filled her heart. Over the past year, she had slowly forgotten him and started her own new life. But this letter, with his handwriting, seemed like a reminder of an important part of her life. The letter began simply but with deep meaning. Walter wrote that he had traveled across the United States over the past year, stopping at farms, meeting workers toiling day and night in the fields, talking with nurses in remote hospitals, and interacting with hardworking truck drivers on long highways. He had visited many big cities but also small villages where life was still simple and humble. The people he met all had their own stories and struggles, but they shared one thing in common: open hearts and resilience. Walter wrote that he was no longer the billionaire he once was. He had left behind the life of luxury and no longer cared about the numbers in his bank account. Instead, he lived a life he called the rich-hearted old man, a life without money but rich in emotions and genuine relationships. These words made Emily pause for a moment, reflecting on what she had. She realized that Walter had found the most important thing in life, something that money could never buy. Emily continued reading, deeply moved. Walter wrote that during his journey, he had learned an invaluable lesson, one that even millions of dollars couldn't buy. It was the ability to listen with the heart. "You taught me something that no $1,000,000 could buy, listen with your heart," he wrote. These words resonated deeply within Emily. She remembered the brief conversations, the moments when she shared her life with Walter, and how he always listened, not just with his ears but with his heart. She also remembered the times he shared the stories of the people he met, stories full of sorrow but also hope. What Walter taught her wasn't just to listen to what others said, but to understand their emotions and unspoken feelings. She realized that sometimes, what mattered wasn't the words, but the silence and sincere listening. This was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. After finishing Walter's letter, Emily couldn't hold back her emotions. She felt that his words weren't just ordinary advice, but messages filled with value. She decided to do something special to honor what Walter had taught her. Emily took the letter and printed it on a beautiful sheet of paper, carefully trimmed it, and hung it on the side of her coffee truck. Beneath the letter, she posted a phrase that she felt truly resonated with everything she had learned from Walter: "We don't change the world with money, but by sitting down together." This was the message she wanted to share with everyone who passed by her truck. She wanted people to understand that changing society wasn't always about money or power, but sometimes it just required us to stop, listen, and share stories from the heart. Coffee was a place where people could sit together, share, and connect. It wasn't just a drink, it was a bridge, a way to understand each other. Emily never imagined that her story would spread so widely. The stories about her coffee truck, the cups of coffee, and the simple conversations had become an inspiration for many. One day, a reporter from the local newspaper came to interview her about the coffee truck and her journey. The story about Walter, about how she started the coffee truck not only to make a living but also to spread a message of love and sharing, caught the attention of many. Not long after, Emily's story was included in the local textbooks as an example of a young citizen contributing to changing societal thinking. She became a role model, an inspiration for young people who dared to change the world around them with small but meaningful actions. Emily never thought her journey could have such a wide impact, but she knew that the values she and Walter shared were slowly changing how people viewed life. Every morning, as the first rays of the sun filtered through the streets of Brooklyn, the rich aroma of coffee from Emily's mobile truck began to spread throughout the neighborhood. People, from the ordinary locals to passers-by, were drawn to the familiar scent. They stopped, not just to enjoy a hot cup of coffee, but to chat, to share their stories, and sometimes just to listen to others. Smiles, warm glances, and sincere words created a space full of love and connection. Emily stood by her truck, looking out at the neighborhood, and she knew that Walter's love was still alive in every cup of coffee she brewed. A love without a name, a simple yet powerful love, a love that could be felt in the brief moments of conversation. And so, every morning, as the smell of coffee spread, it didn't just bring joy to those drinking it, but carried with it the message of love, listening, and understanding that Walter had taught her. We often think that changing the world has to start with big things, great actions. But it's in those small, simple moments, in the cups of coffee shared with others, that we realize the world doesn't change through numbers or power, but through kindness, listening, and genuine connections. Emily and Walter's story isn't just a journey of personal change, it's proof that every small action can create a big wave, spreading love and changing societal thinking. We might not be able to change the world easily, but with simple acts, we can certainly make this world a better place. And so, the story of the coffee truck, Walter's Brew, continues to write new chapters every day. From a young woman with a heart full of dreams to a billionaire who left behind the glamour to seek true values in life. They've created an inspiring legacy. A legacy not built from money, but from moments of sharing, from honest words, and from the connection between strangers. Cups of coffee are not just a drink, but a reminder that we can always change the world, not with wealth or power, but by opening our hearts, listening to each other, and sharing love. Emily and Walter's story, though ending beautifully, isn't really an end. Because every day, as we continue to listen and share, we write our own stories. Stories that can change the world in our own unique way. And now, if you too believe that every action, no matter how small, can make a difference, join the Heart Glow community. Share your story, your small acts, so together we can light the fire of love and change society. Don't hesitate, because now is the time for us to create a brighter world together. Follow Heart Glow and start your journey of spreading love today.